My name is Deja, and I am the owner of Sincerely Sanguine. I had the opportunity to watch B.Simone's recent viral podcast episode with Shekinah, and here are my thoughts from a clinical mental health, mental wellness perspective. Speaking of mental illness, I was originally going to go to the library, but I'm feeling very under the weather, so I just decided to be outside so I don't get anybody else sick. But yeah, let's jump right into it. So I've been looking at a lot of think pieces about that conversation, and I think it's unfortunate that she has to monitor her finances at a different level than which she's used to. But when she said my finances, I thought that was hilarious.
Just my finances. Like the budgeting, you see.
And if I hit you with one of these, my finances, that means I don't have it. Outside of that, I thought the question of do you think you're a good friend was a great theme for that podcast or the conversation. So B.Simone asked Shekinah, do you think I'm a good friend? And then Shekinah asked B.Simone, do you think I'm a good friend? And I think that was a great opportunity to provide feedback for each other. Overall, I think, just to start off, I think it's fascinating how we can want to emulate and idolize celebrities until they do something that we don't like, and then all of a sudden we don't like them. When it comes to B.Simone had everybody going around talking about baby girl or talking in a certain way because that was her influence, and now all of a sudden people are on the B.Simone hate train. Like, everything she does, it's a problem. And this video is not to critique B.Simone, it's just to give my overall opinion on the podcast episode because there's a lot to learn there. One thing that really stood out to me was time stamped on the podcast video was 33 minutes and 34 seconds in. So Shekinah is sharing about how she called up B.Simone and she was sharing some really big and great news. And B.Simone's response was, okay, and she hung up. But B.Simone expressed that she immediately called back after and explained to Shekinah, like, that didn't feel right. And Shekinah was like, what are you feeling? Are you feeling jealous? And B.Simone was like, no, I'm not feeling jealous because I don't want what you have. And I think that's a great starting point. That whole dynamic was great to watch. And I think there's a healthy way of doing things and then there's an unhealthy way of doing things. So the fact that B.Simone was able to call her friend back and say, hey, in this moment, I'm feeling a bit weird and I don't appreciate how I showed up in that moment. So I want to process that with you. And I thought that was really good. That was really healthy. The thing that I did not find somewhat healthy, or I didn't understand because they speak very vaguely. So they then begin to flesh out what B.Simone was feeling. Sorry, the ants are like crawling all over me. What B.Simone was feeling. So she was like, are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling jealous? And I felt like in that moment, in processing B.Simone's feelings, it took away from Shekinah sharing that big news. So when B.Simone called back and she said, I am feeling this way, I'm not sure where this is coming from, I feel like it would have been more conducive to say, like, I need a moment to process it, not like process it immediately, because it took away from Shekinah sharing what she shared. B.Simone then said, after they were going back and forth processing, will we be able, direct quote, B.Simone said, will we be able to do what we did before? I think she's referring to the Know For Sure podcast. And again, I felt like in that moment, the focus was less on Shekinah's big news and more on B.Simone and processing her feelings. And although she said, I wasn't feeling feelings of jealousy because I don't want what you have, you could also argue that although you're not feeling jealous of what the person has, you could be feeling jealous or a sense of resentment because although you don't want what they have, you don't have what you want. So that could also not foster jealousy, but again, resentment. And another pivotal point, or another point that stood out to me, these bugs. Another point that stood out to me, I think I have lotion on, that's the problem. Another point that stood out to me was how B.Simone emphasizes putting people on as a form of collaboration. And I think there's a difference between collaborating with somebody and putting somebody on, depending on how you flip it. I don't want to get too caught up in semantics, but the way B.Simone, I interpreted it, okay, whatever. The way I interpreted it was she wants to hire people to then put them on to what they want to do, but she wants them to be loyal to her for a duration, for a period of time, and then they could do whatever they want. And she did explain that, and I'll explain that more later on. But like I said, there's a difference between putting somebody on, and there's a difference between collaborating with somebody. And the way I interpreted it, it's when putting somebody on, like, let's think of a group. Brandy didn't put Monica on, or Beyonce didn't put Jay-Z on. Those are collaborations. But when you're putting somebody on, it's like they owe you one, or there's a clear distinction between I'm the star and I'm pulling you up with me, rather than we are equals and we're collaborating together. And I think that's where B.Simone kind of falls short in certain areas, because she wants to hire people, she wants to befriend people, but there's a lack of boundaries, and as a result, it kind of perpetuates the toxic work culture. Like, oh, we're a family, we do everything together, we love each other, but in the end, there is a clear hierarchy, and it can't be an authentic family dynamic, because there is only one boss and you are subordinate to your boss. No matter how you flip it, that's how it is. So when you say we're a big family, you're still the head and we are the tail, or the employees are the tail. And speaking of poor boundaries and that toxic workplace, I guess, mentality, people want to benefit from the perks of the relationship, of the familial relationship, without having to make the investment, or without having to like have those tough conversations, or acknowledge like there is a clear imbalance in power. Like, if you have an issue with your boss, but you guys consider each other family, your job is on the line depending on what you say, how you say it. So you have to be mindful, and that's not very family-like. That's boss and worker. And people need to understand, like, there's a thin line between friend and business. And it's important to have those clear boundaries. Like, when we're doing business, we're business partners, but when we're friends, we're friends. Both can exist at the same time, but again, there needs to be clear boundaries. I noticed that a lot of times B.Simone was very validation seeking. So she said to Shekinah, "Tell me who I am right now." And I was just like, you can't figure that out for yourself. Or every time there was a conversation, it was just like, pour into me, tell me who I am, tell me, like, validate me. And that brings me to another point, that this friendship dynamic will fail every single time. And the friendship dynamic that I'm talking about is the people pleaser and the self-centered friend. And this could be in a friendship dynamic of more than 2, but in every single dynamic that follows that same people pleaser versus somebody who's self-centered, it doesn't work, because the people pleaser is constantly trying to please the self-absorbed one, and the self-absorbed one is constantly trying to like get validation from the people pleaser, and it's just a cyclical cycle, because they can't fulfill each other, because there's this sense of unfulfillment. And we've seen that in a lot of television shows, and it makes for great television. We've seen it with Joan and Tony, we've seen it with Molly and Issa, and now we've seen it with B.Simone and her friend Megan Ashley. And although we don't know what happened behind closed doors, that was the dynamic that was presented to us. And unfortunately, as I said, it failed, because it was just too much. The boundaries were poor. And as a result, there was these false expectations set, and I'm sure they felt unfulfilled in some areas because the needs could not be met because they were unrealistic. And I think B.Simone wants her employees to be her friends, but sometimes you need to keep employees as employees. You could be friendly, but you don't have to be friends. And I think understanding that not everybody is your best friend, not everybody has to be family, is important, especially when it comes to business. There was another part that really stood out to me when B.Simone was talking about building a team, and she said, when it comes to building a team, this is not a direct quote, I'm just paraphrasing. She wants people to stay for a year, like be committed to her brand, be committed to the vision, direct quote, that's word she used, for a year. But whatever you want to do on the side for yourself, you need to do it after that 1 year. So that really stood out to me, because that in itself is toxic work culture. I want you to pour into my business instead of focusing on your aspirations, focusing on your goals, focusing on your desires, or even collaborating the two, so that when you leave me, you'll have something of your own. And I think that was where the contradiction came in for me, because it was just like, you want to put people on, but they're not allowed to focus on what their goals are, what their aspirations are, alongside what your vision is. And again, that's unrealistic, because people have dreams and aspirations for themselves, and we can pour into your vision without having to sacrifice our own goals and future aspirations. And I think that part really stood out to me, because it's like, I want you to pour into my brand 100%. And if there's anything left for you after that, go for it. She said that, she mentioned Tyler Perry and how he has his own Tyler Perry Studios. And she was just like, if you want to do your own thing, don't work for me. Just have me be like a producer of your thing. But then again, that's not really collaborating. That's just having your hand in their thing. So it's just like a double standard. It's like, I want people to pour into me, but I don't want to pour into them, or I don't want to pour into them if it doesn't benefit me directly. And I think that was also another conversation that I was having, and it's gonna rain again, about how in some relationships, friendships primarily, we are expected to, this is gonna be a segue, to stand in as the stand-in partner or stand-in boyfriend. And in one of the parts, B.Simone said that Shekinah kept standing her up, and Shekinah was just like, oh, that's when I had a boyfriend. So B.Simone was sharing a story about how she had gotten dressed and she was ready. She was looking out at the view in her apartment, waiting to hang out with her friend. And then Shekinah texted her, was just like, oh, just forget about it. I'm not coming anymore. And B.Simone was really disappointed. And Shekinah's response was, well, that's when I had a boyfriend. And I think that B.Simone expressed that she was jealous of the time, that she didn't have enough time with her friend because her friend was prioritizing her boyfriend. But I'm sure prior to the boyfriend, her friend had all the time in the world to spend with B.Simone. And I think and having the conversation of, are you okay with being the stand-in boyfriend until they get a boyfriend and then they abandon you, is a really important conversation to have, because you can have a boyfriend, you can have a significant other without having to abandon your friends. And I think that's where the transactional friendships or the low maintenance friendships start to rear their head, because it's just like, you weren't low maintenance until you had something else that caught your attention. So yeah, that part really stood out to me, and how in speaking on that moment, B.Simone was like, after the first time I didn't say anything, after the second time I had to speak up. He's like, this is the third time you've stood me up. So it's just like, eventually it was bothering her so much that she had to tally it. And that's a clear sign that something is wrong, and communication and conversations need to be had. Overall, the first time I watched the interview, Lord, it was a doozy. But the second time I watched it, I looked at it from a different lens. I was more empathetic, and I don't have any ill feelings towards B.Simone. I don't know B.Simone, and I think that's a clear distinction that we need to make. We don't know these people. We just see what they give us, and B.Simone oftentimes speaks so vaguely. It's just like, what are we even talking about? But in watching her interview, her most recent interview, I think it's important to identify that you can mix friendships and business, but it's important to have clear boundaries. And also, don't abandon your friends when you get a partner. Don't be the stand-in partner. Be a friend. And speak up for yourself. And although I mentioned the dynamic of the self-centered friend versus the people-pleasing friend, that is a dynamic, but that doesn't have to be the end-all be-all of a friendship. You can identify the pattern, the behavior, and change it, therefore changing the dynamic. But like I said, once that dynamic is present, you're headed straight for the bin. The friendship will not last. It might last a bit, but you will not feel fulfilled. You will not feel happy, and you won't feel connected to the person that is on the other side of it. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but in that dynamic, it doesn't have to be set. One person doesn't have to be the self-centered one, and one person doesn't have to be the people pleaser. It could be interchanging. So yeah, it just depends on the day. And yeah, that concludes my watch review of the Let's Try This Again episode. And I hope I made sense. It's a bit difficult. I literally cannot breathe. Like, I don't know what is going on. I was very sick 2 days ago, but I'm getting better now. But it's just not going away. It's going away very slowly, but yeah. Friendships are beautiful. I mentioned in the Where Is Your Mother workbook, 11 tips to healing yourself or healing your inner child when overcoming your mother wound. And one of the tips is sisterhood, like good gossip. I think it's important to have good girlfriends, to have good friends, because there are things that you can do with your girlfriends that you can't do with your friends. And as somebody who loves the show Girlfriends, that is one of my favorite shows, and also Waiting to Exhale, I love Waiting to Exhale. I love a good sisterhood moment. However, I also had to identify that you play a role in how people treat you, and you can determine what you put up with. And I was putting up with a lot of crap. And there comes a point where you just have to stand up. We're able to stand up when it comes to a man, but when it comes to our sisters, it's like a barrier to that. So I'm learning to see things for what they are and move accordingly. And we'll close it out there. Again, my name is Deja, and I'm the owner of Saley Sanguine, and that is my not another think piece on the Let's Try This Again podcast.